Hello, welcome to Talk Back. We're continuing our series of interviews with our candidates for office. Don't forget, the election's, I think, about 3.5 weeks away, November 8th. And I'm happy to have my guest now, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Connecticut, Susan Bysiewicz. Hi, Lieutenant Governor. You look nice and cozy and warm in your coat.
I'm in a very cold office, but it's lovely to join you again. Nice to see you.
Yes. The studio is open. We're doing this remotely, but more and more we're doing things in studio after our COVID. We're now studio's open, which is great. So, but it's still convenient, isn't it, to sit where you are and to get on the computer and connect. So our Zoom has helped us connect in a way that we probably didn't think possible when COVID started. It's really made a difference. So there are so many things that are on the burner for the election. But I have to start with the same issue that I started with Attorney General Tong, and that is the threats to our democracy and to the rule of law in this country, which are so important. Brings to mind what we heard yesterday in the January 6th committee. And we're hoping that that will be top of mind for people when they vote on November 8th. So talk about that.
Absolutely. Democracy literally is on the ballot. And I'll tell you how, Sheila. Democracy is on the ballot because there is a constitutional question that asks voters to vote yes or no on this question. Should the voters of Connecticut should the state of Connecticut allow the voters to vote early? And I hope that our voters will vote yes, because during the last presidential election in 2020, we were able to vote early by an absentee ballot. And that brought one of the highest participation rates to that presidential election. Nearly 40% of the voters chose to vote by absentee ballot. They were allowed to vote earlier than Election Day, by voting through absentee ballot. And that tells me that people want to have flexibility and they want to be able to vote on other days, not just Election Day. So many people have other jobs. They have several jobs. So many people work outside of the state and have to travel for their jobs, or they have work hours that make it difficult to vote during polling hours. So I hope that voters will look for that question on our ballot, and it'll be the right of all of the candidates that are on the ballot.
Right. So it's interesting that we have great election laws in general in Connecticut, and we have a high percentage, but we're still one of the only states in the country that doesn't have some form of early voting. And isn't that because
only 4 states? Because some people might be watching and think this is a political issue. This is not a revenue issue, because 46 states around the country have some form of early voting. We are one of 4 states without early voting. And so we want that flexibility. I think more people would vote if they had that flexibility.
And it's just a quirk of our Constitution that we need to amend the Constitution in order to change election laws. Whereas other states can just pass legislation without having a constitutional amendment. But yeah, it is on the ballot, and people should look for it. It's going to be after all the candidates, right? It's not going to be first.
That's right.
So that's very important. Hopefully, we'll get that done. So, other issue. I know this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and an incident happened a few days ago in Bristol that I think brought together all of these issues: domestic violence, gun safety, right, and what do you think? How do we react to something like and the threats to our gun legislation here in Connecticut too, that I'm worried about?
Oh my goodness. So there are a lot of aspects to that question. First, I'll say that it was a devastating day in the morning to learn that overnight 2 Bristol police officers were killed and 1 seriously injured at a home that had called for help in a domestic violence situation. And it was, the governor and I were just devastated to learn that. And we went to the vigil in Bristol, where the entire Bristol community came to the auditorium at Bristol Eastern High School to pray for and support the families of those lost. It was just a terrible thing. It appears that an AR-15 automatic weapon was used and was the weapon used by the person who killed those and injured those officers. You know, we have among the toughest gun safety laws in the country. But I know the governor and I want to do more because that loss was just absolutely horrendous and senselessly tragic.
Right. And you said, are our gun laws under threat? I know there are some cases now that are trying to do away with our assault weapons ban in Connecticut.
You are right. So in the aftermath of Sandy Hook,
right,
our state legislature passed an assault weapon ban. And every year since that has been passed, there have been attempts to overturn it in our state legislature. But I think what you are speaking about was the Bruin case that the Supreme Court decided around the same time they decided the Dobbs case with respect to reproductive rights. And the Bruin case is a direct attack on Connecticut's gun laws. And in fact, the governor and our administration has been sued as a result of that case. And the idea is to try to overturn our Sandy Hook law. And I will say, Sheila, that there couldn't be a starker choice between the governor and I and the Democratic team and the other team. And I say that because in 2018, the NRA gave Bob Stefanowski an A rating because he said he would work to overturn the Sandy Hook gun legislation. And the governor and I have been protecting and defending that legislation. And we've supported other gun safety legislation like the Safe Storage Act or Ethan's Law that requires people who have guns in their home keep them stored safely so that children do not get access to them. So we think there's much more to do. There are too many military and assault type weapons in Connecticut, and it is just devastating that one of those weapons was used in Bristol.
Right. So that issue is on top of mind. And also the other issue that I think many Republicans in Connecticut, I saw them on the steps of the legislature cheering on the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And that's something else we have to work hard to protect. I know in Connecticut, we've codified it, but according to the recent talks by Republican leaders in Washington and in other states, they want a federal law outlawing abortion. Talk about that and how important that is to preserve those rights.
Well, we do, Sheila, you're right. We've had a Roe versus Wade statute in our state's law since the early 1990s. And that law is now threatened because we have Republican senators who have introduced a national abortion ban. And if that law were to be passed in Washington, that would threaten our state's Roe versus Wade statute. And this is why it is so important for voters to be educated about where candidates stand on reproductive freedom. The governor and I, in the aftermath of the Dobbs case being struck down, literally the morning that the Dobbs decision was announced, the governor and I stopped everything we were doing that day to let the people of Connecticut know we would do everything in our power to protect women's reproductive rights in our state. And what was a very sharp contrast was the response from Bob Stefanowski, because there was just silence. He said nothing. And then when he was called upon to comment, he said, "No need to worry, Connecticut is fine because Connecticut has a Roe law." But in the very same breath, he said, "But Connecticut legislators really should consider weakening the Roe law that we have." And the governor and I have a starkly different position. We very strongly believe that our Roe law should be defended against any attempt to weaken it. And legislators will tell you that every year there are attempts to cut back or weaken our Roe law. And so we have threats from within. We have threats from legislators, and we have threats from Washington, because now the Republicans are trying to impose a national abortion ban. And that's why it matters who people vote for in our state legislature and for Congress and for the United States Senate.
Right. A lot of the polling and the commentators are saying that that issue is motivating a lot of people to come out and vote, and hopefully vote for Democrats this year. In fact, somebody called it, instead of November, somebody called it Rovember. I'm sure you've heard that expression.
I've been saying there's 25 days till November 8th.
Rovember. So let's hope that the enthusiasm and the interest in that still continues to motivate people for a Democratic legislature. It is amazing to me that we think of Connecticut as a pretty progressive state, but some of the Republicans are really way in the back of very regressive in their views and so on. So that's one issue that I know is important to you. Let's just also talk about COVID. I mean, so many people are putting it in the back of their minds when it maybe still should a little bit be top of mind, because we're not sure that we're 100% out of it as we would like. Fewer and fewer places you go to are requiring vaccines, are requiring masks. And I wonder how you and the governor are handling that, because one of the accomplishments that was great is, I think, that you and the governor had the best job of almost any state, I think, in handling the pandemic, right? And what are your thoughts now? Because I don't know if everybody's getting a booster who should be getting a booster.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say this, that I won't forget the very first day in early March of 2020 that our first COVID case was announced. And at that point, we didn't know what caused it. We didn't know how to treat it. There was no vaccine. No one had a stockpile of personal protective equipment. And I have learned so much about the governor's leadership watching how he handled COVID. He was very calm. He was decisive. He made decisions based on medical advice and data and science. And to your point, I think that was why he became a leader, and Connecticut became a leader across the country in protection of public health, because we took it really seriously. We were able to order a lot of personal protective equipment, get it distributed to nursing homes first, and we made a plan to not only expand testing, because that was a way to keep people safe, but also to make sure that people were getting vaccines as soon as they were available. And, I think that we have to be very careful. I looked today, and there were more than 400 people in the hospital with COVID. So it is, I think we've learned a lot about COVID. We know more about treatment. More people are keeping themselves from going to the hospital because they are vaccinated, but it's really important to get a booster. And the governor and I just got the bivalent booster, which protects against several strains of COVID that have been out there. And people should also get a flu shot, because we are starting to see flu cases, and flu goes from usually October to May.
Right.
And flu is something that can kill several thousand people. And so I want to remind people, and the FDA has just approved vaccinations for younger children. So that's important, because we are seeing thousands of COVID cases in public schools.
I was going to ask, I think children are not being vaccinated at the same rate as they should be.
No, especially the youngest children. There's been a very slow uptake of those vaccines. And so we want to encourage parents to get their children from infants all the way up through 5 years old to get vaccinated. That's the lowest. That's the group with the lowest rate of vaccination uptake. That is really important, especially in homes where you have multi-generations living in the same home. This is a way to protect people in the community.
Right. So let's turn to the economy and a lot of the accomplishments that you and the governor and the legislature made. I mean, balancing the budget, that's a huge thing for Connecticut, right? Talk about the financial and the economic things that are helping, even in an age where we're worried about inflation, as we can't get away from that today.
Yes, absolutely. So here we are, 4 years, almost 4 years since when the governor and I started. And when we started, we were looking at a $4 billion deficit over the first 2 years. And it seemed to be a huge challenge, and it was. But the good news is that here we are almost 4 years later, and we've had 4 balanced budgets without raising taxes. In fact, in this past budget, in the summertime that we passed, we had the biggest tax cut in the history of Connecticut, providing $600 million of relief to the families that needed it the most. And so we're so proud of that. And here's the big thing, that we have paid down $5.4 billion of pension debt. Which is significant when you think that going into that, before we did that, our debt was $40 billion. So to take out $5.4 billion of that $40 billion debt is a really big chunk. And that's going to save us $448 million a year over the next 20 years. And that's really very, very important because that means that we will be able to use that money for critical programs or to pay down more debt. Also, we are very proud of the way we have invested record rainy day funds in our communities and invested it in childcare and job training and debt-free community college. These things are really important to families across the state, including the child tax rebate, which we had mailed to families who were eligible, and it was $250 per child up to 3 children. And we're hoping to continue that. We've done a lot of good things for the state. We've gotten our state back onto sound financial footing, and we're really looking forward to continuing that work.
Yeah. And I also know that your agency for women and girls is very important to you, and the STEM programs. Why don't you talk about that and the progress that's being made in those along those lines?
Mm-hmm. Well, shortly after the governor and I took office, we decided to create a governor's council on women and girls. We decided to follow the model of both President Obama, who had a federal women and girls cabinet, and the state of New York, which had a women and girls cabinet. And we've been able to do some really great work, both in terms of economic opportunity and workforce development, in promoting STEM education for women and girls, because those are the highest paying jobs, health and safety, and also leadership. And we've been very proud to have the Lieutenant Governor's Computing Challenge, and we've had thousands of young people participate in that coding challenge. We've done it for 3 years, and in December, we will announce our new challenge for the springtime. We're very excited about that, and we're proud of the accomplishments that our administration has had to uplift women. So one was the raising of the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Another big accomplishment was the passage and establishment of our state's Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, which is now helping more than 20,000 families a month, families who are staying home, like a parent who's staying home to care for a child that's just born or a sick relative. And we also have made some strides toward pay equity in our legislature. So we're excited about the opportunity to do more.
Right. So we also get talking about education. I know that's an important issue in Connecticut. And I think I read that Connecticut is rated number 3 in the country, after I think it's Massachusetts and New Jersey, for the best public school education. How can we get to number 1? What is the Lamont Bysiewicz team doing for that?
Well, we are really proud that we're number 3. We want to be number 1. I think that one of the reasons that we are very highly rated is that we provide so many early childhood and preschool opportunities, because those Head Start and early childhood development programs are critical to our kids' success. Also, we made sure during COVID to do as much online and hybrid learning as we could. And we kept our schools open and we kept kids safe. And I think that was one of the reasons why Joe Biden decided to take Miguel Cardona, our education commissioner, and bring him to Washington and make him the education cabinet secretary. One of the things that I do is I lead the Interagency Council on eliminating the achievement gap. So we are really trying to focus on how we can make sure that every child, no matter what zip code they live in, gets excellent education. And so we, over the past several summers, have made sure that there were free education programs, especially in alliance school districts across the state, so that children had educational and recreational opportunities during the school day and beyond. Places like New London actually had schools open throughout the summer from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., which was amazing. And that those kinds of programs were available across the state, and we used American Rescue resources to do that, to make sure that our kids were caught up and learning and achieving. And I just want to give a shout out to Joe Courtney and Senator Blumenthal, who made sure that we got $7 billion of American Rescue money, which we invested in education and infrastructure throughout the state. And the governor and I are so proud to be on the ballot with them.
Yeah. So another issue that motivated Governor Lamont to get into the governor's race years ago when he ran was the idea that, look, we want our young people to grow up here, get a great education, and stay here and be part of the community. So overall, what are the things we need to do to get a better labor force and have the kids stay here, and also create a cultural atmosphere, right, that will inspire young people to stay in Connecticut rather than searching green pastures somewhere else?
Well, so that is a big question, and there's so many aspects to it. I will say this, that during and after COVID, I think people realized what a safe and beautiful state we are. And we had more than 50,000 new families come to our state. And a lot of people came from more densely populated places like Boston and New York. So the way we can keep our young people, number one, is make sure that our young people know that we have debt-free community college, which means that you can even get an associate's degree while you are in high school. Places like Hamden High School, Manchester High School, Middletown High School have advanced manufacturing programs. So if you start as a freshman taking those programs, you can have an associate's degree. By the time you graduate from high school, you can take a very good paying job in the manufacturing sector, and you can get your other 2 years of college, usually paid for by an employer. And that is an opportunity to not only have a good paying job, but also to get an education for free. We also know that young people really like living in cities or in places where they don't have to have a car. So the governor and I have made transit-oriented development a real priority. And so places like Meriden, Windsor Locks, New Haven, Milford, Norwalk, Stamford are seeing an influx of young people who can rent an affordable apartment right next to a train station, and they can hop on a train, go to work, and then come home and be near all kinds of cultural and retail and restaurant opportunities. And so I think that's one of the ways we keep young people in Connecticut. And the other thing I'll say is workforce is a challenge no matter whether if you're electric boat, the state of Connecticut, the manufacturing sector, every sector needs people. And our governor's workforce council has brought together our community colleges, our state's technical high schools, and our state's public and private universities together with our employers of all sizes, very large, medium, and small, to say, what do you need? And how can we get a pipeline of trained people to help you and so that you can employ them in across these different sectors. And I think that's been tremendously helpful. We've started programs in IT, nursing, healthcare, manufacturing, and we're very excited about some of the federal grants that we've gotten, $70 million for job training. Thank you, Joe Courtney. That's going to help us connect our young people with very good paying jobs so they can stay here.
Okay, I hope so. You're making progress. That's good. So before we go, I'd like to give us, we talked about some of the important issues now that are top of mind. What are your priorities for the next administration after November? What's on the burner then to get done?
I think in addition to workforce, because I don't think we've ever had a point in our state's history where we have 100,000 open jobs across all sectors. It doesn't matter. We need people in state government. We need people in manufacturing, healthcare, finance, biotech, retail. There is such a need for people. Our challenge is going to continue to be to connect people who want not just a job, but a career path with the training they need to fill those open jobs. I think workforce development is our biggest challenge, and we have put a framework into place and started dozens of programs, and we want to see those come to fruition. And also, I'll say, if you're looking for training in a job, please reach out to our Department of Labor and to our Governor's Council on Workforce, because we will provide childcare if you need it. We will provide transportation if you need it. And we've never had that. We don't want there to be barriers for anyone to get a good paying job and start a really great career. I think another really important priority for our administration going forward will be to continue to fight climate change. We've introduced electric buses in cities, in state transportation, and we want to help municipalities have electric buses to try to reduce childhood asthma. We have been able to pass legislation to make our coastal communities in Connecticut more resilient. We've started a goal to be carbon free as a state by 2040. We'd like us to get there much sooner. But when the wind farms are built off the coast of Connecticut, in the next couple of years, we'll be 93% carbon free. So we're getting close. We've created all kinds of green energy programs, but you see these superstorms and these hurricanes hitting in Florida and Puerto Rico, and it really underscores how we all have to be focused on fighting climate change. And the governor and I want to lead the way on that.
Great. Okay, so in our final moments, I'm going to give you the last word. What is it, Lieutenant Governor, that you would most like to say to the voters right now?
I would most like to say, that this is an important election because reproductive rights are on the ballot. Our state's fiscal health is on the ballot. I think the governor and I have put us onto a very sound fiscal path, and please be informed. Make sure that you are informed on candidates' positions, because this election really is a matter of life and death. So please, please choose carefully, and don't forget to vote on the question of early voting. I think so many people would like the opportunity to vote early. So please vote yes on that question.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Good luck on the campaign trail. We'll see you soon, and we'll see everybody next time on Talk Back. Bye.
Thanks for having me, Sheila.